Hi, I'm Rowan. I opened a credit card to help cover my mom's hospital bills. 3 days later, I saw my brother on a yacht, celebrating my nephew's birthday with a $24,000 cake in the Mediterranean, paid for with my card. When I asked, he laughed, said, "Thanks for the card." I smiled back, not because it was funny, because it was finished. But how do you make peace when your own family profits off your silence? The sky was still dark when I backed out of the driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires like it didn't want me to go. Austin mornings could be peaceful, but not when you're on your way to Seton Hospital again. My old Ford truck rattled down the near-empty street, the same route I'd driven every morning for the past 2 months. Inside, the cab smelled faintly of motor oil and stress. The hospital coffee I picked up at the entrance vending machine was bitter as always, but I drank it anyway, burnt, too strong, and exactly what I deserved. Mom had been sick for a while now, stage 4. She stopped asking questions about the bills weeks ago. And me? I just kept showing up, kept signing papers, kept paying, because that's what the youngest does in a family like mine. We carry what the older ones drop. I remember thinking, as I took another sip of that miserable coffee, family means everyone pays. In some way. I just didn't know I'd be the only one writing checks. It was just past noon when Clinton called. I stepped out into the hospital courtyard to take it. The air was hot, but dry, a rare break in June. "Ro," he said, his voice smooth like butter left out too long. "I know you're handling all the paperwork. And seriously, thank you. Don't stress about the money, okay? We'll all split Mom's bills. I promise. Just keep the ball rolling." He always made things sound easy. That's how he was raised. Born charming, stayed charming, never paid for it. And like a fool, I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah," I said, "okay. Just temporary, right?" "Right," he said, "temporary." That night, I sat at the small kitchen table in my apartment, credit report pulled up on the screen. I hadn't planned to open another card, but temporary sounded manageable. A few grand on a high-limit line, just until they sent their shares. My hand shook a little as I filled out the application. When the approval came back within minutes, I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and told myself, "You're not being taken advantage of. You're helping." The next morning, Mom was half awake when I walked into her room. She looked smaller every day. The nurse smiled politely and handed me a new statement. I didn't even flinch anymore. I slid the new card through the terminal, signed my name. "Clinton always knows what's best for the family," Mom murmured. I smiled at her, because what else was there to do? But my throat tightened. When the printer spat out the receipt, I folded it once, then again, and again. 3 perfect creases. I tucked it into the inside pocket of my wallet, next to a photo of us from better days. Mom watched me. "What's that for?" "In case they forget I paid," I said, almost whispering. She didn't respond. She just closed her eyes. 3 days later, I sat at the same table, light pouring through the window like it wanted to mock me. Bills lay scattered across the surface. A pill bottle rattled near the edge. I opened my laptop, intent on checking due dates. Instead, a video auto-played the second I logged into Facebook. Laughter, music, the sea. At first, I thought it was an ad. But then I saw Clinton's smug grin and recognized the Mediterranean sky. He stood on a yacht, my older brother, dressed in white linen like he was in a travel magazine. His wife twirled behind him, holding a champagne flute. The cake was shaped like an anchor, and the caption read, "Happy 12th, Tyler, $24,000 well spent, worth every penny." I didn't blink. I just stared. Then I hit pause, rewinded, watched again. My heart pounded, but my body felt still, frozen in place. The sound of the waves and synthetic party music echoed off the walls. I scrolled to my banking app, opened the card, last charge, Mediterranean Charter Lines, $24,000. The card I'd opened for Mom's bills. I didn't remember dialing Clinton's number, but there it was, ringing. "Ro," he said cheerfully, as if I'd called to chat about barbecue plans. "Yeah, that charge? I used your card. Don't worry, man. We'll sort it next week. Chill, bro." Silence. Then, like it was nothing. "Thanks for the card, by the way." Something inside me twisted, slow, bitter. Not rage, not yet. Just this cold realization that I'd been played. I looked at the wallet sitting beside my coffee mug, reached in, pulled out the folded receipt, opened it along the same creases. My signature stared back at me. I laughed, just a little, barely a sound, but it felt like a wall cracking. "You're welcome," I said flat. "You always were good at forgetting." He didn't respond. I hung up. Leaning back in my chair, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. The yacht video still played on mute. I closed the screen. The echo of their party clung to the silence. "That card," I whispered, "just paid for more than I thought." But what it bought wasn't the party. It was my clarity. I sat there long after the call ended, long after Clinton's voice had stopped bouncing around the inside of my skull. The laughter from that yacht video still lingered, but now it sounded distant, hollow. I stared at the credit card lying flat on the table, like a loaded weapon I'd handed over without knowing. My phone buzzed again. "Clinton." I didn't answer. I just watched the screen until it dimmed. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept playing scenes in my head, not of the yacht, but of years ago, the times I'd stepped in without being asked, the messes I'd cleaned up in silence. 3 days later, I got the message. "Dinner at our place this Sunday. Family only. Let's celebrate Mom's recovery. Clinton." The words felt polished, like he rehearsed them for show. I stared at it for a minute, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every instinct in me said, "Don't go." But then came the tug, familiar, old, poisonous, guilt, obligation, the illusion that if I didn't show up, I'd be the problem. I typed, "I'll be there." Sunday arrived with that strange kind of heat where the sun isn't scorching, but it clings to your neck anyway. I pulled into their neighborhood where every lawn looked like it belonged in a brochure, and every driveway was a quiet competition. Clinton's house stood tall and bright at the end of the cul-de-sac, windows glowing warm. I parked around the corner, out of sight. The front door opened before I even knocked. Paige stood there, perfectly composed, wine already in hand. "Rowan," she smiled, cool as a receptionist at a 5-star hotel. "Wow, you came." "I said I would," I replied simply. Inside, everything gleamed, from the polished marble floor to the ridiculous ice sculpture in the dining room, shaped like a swan. No doubt Paige's idea. The air smelled like money and catered ambition. Mom sat at the head of the table, looking thinner than before, but happy. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "My boys, together again," she said. "Just like old times." I leaned down to hug her. "You look beautiful, Mom." She smiled wider, and for a second, everything else faded. Dinner started with the usual noise, silverware clinking, wine glasses raised, polite jokes, a few fake laughs. Clinton played the gracious host, his voice just a little too loud, like he needed everyone to know he was in control. Halfway through the meal, he stood up, glass raised. "To family," he announced, pausing for effect, "and to those who always step up when needed." Everyone clapped. except me. It sounded like praise, but it wasn't. It was a performance, a warning. His eyes landed on mine for a beat too long. I didn't blink. Instead, I found myself drifting backward, mentally anyway. I remembered being 17 when Dad's business fell apart. Clinton had disappeared for a while, some internship in New York. I stayed. I sold my car, emptied my savings to help cover the mortgage Mom didn't know was overdue. When things settled, Clinton showed up with flowers for Mom and stories about how hard it had been for him to be away during the crisis. He got the hugs. I got the silence. Later that year, Mom had whispered to me after dinner, "You're the quiet one, but that's your strength." Back then, I wore that like armor. Tonight, it felt more like a muzzle. After the toast, we moved to the formal dining room. Every seat had a name card, little printed tinted cards in gold ink, except mine. I looked around. Clinton gestured vaguely toward the far end. "I think there's a spot open down there." The only open seat was next to the restroom. Staff walked by every few minutes, trays clattering, doors swinging. I walked over and sat without a word. Paige raised her eyebrows and gave a polished smirk. "Oh, we didn't expect you'd actually make it. How thoughtful of you to sit there." Laughter rippled across the table like a breeze, light, but sharp enough to cut. I lifted my glass. "I'm exactly where I belong." The laughter died quickly. Dinner continued. Conversations floated past me. Stock tips, vacation plans, meaningless noise. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. I watched. Clinton kept checking his phone, pretending to be subtle. He was probably refreshing that Yacht post, tracking reactions, counting likes like dollar bills. Paige's wrist caught the chandelier light just right, her diamond bracelet flashing like a signal flare. I recognized it. She'd bragged once about getting it with reward points. Funny thing about reward points, they're tied to whoever owns the card. I took a slow sip of water. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt still. By dessert, Mom was starting to fade. The smile on her face was softer now, like a light dimming. Clinton wrapped an arm around her shoulder and leaned toward me with a grin too wide. "You've always been good at staying quiet, Rowan," he said, like it was a compliment. "Keep it that way." I looked him in the eye, calm, steady. "I plan to." But in my mind, the rest of that sentence was loud and clear, "until it matters most." And that moment came sooner than anyone expected. When I got back from that dinner, I couldn't bring myself to turn on the lights. The apartment felt heavier than usual, filled with that stale quiet that follows humiliation. I placed the unopened bottle of wine Clinton had given me on the counter. It was supposed to be a thank you for coming gift. I looked at it, then at the stack of my mother's medical papers spread across the table. "They toast to family," I muttered, "and I pay for the glass." I sank into the chair and stared until the room blurred. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, tired, smaller somehow. The next morning came with the sound of mail sliding under the door. One white envelope, heavy with bad news. My name printed neatly across the front. I ripped it open. There it was. The first credit card statement. Hospital charges. Pharmacy payments. And then the line that burned itself into my brain. Mediterranean Charter Lines. $24,000. The total balance read just over $30,000. I blinked, hoping maybe I was misreading it. I wasn't. My hand found the phone before my thoughts caught up. I called the number on the back of the card. After a few rings, a calm voice answered, "Thank you for calling. This is Kelly. How can I help you today?" There's a mistake, I said. That $24,000 charge. It wasn't mine. Let me take a look, she replied. Her typing filled the silence. I do see a secondary authorized user on your account. All charges appear to have been made by someone listed there. That would be... She paused, then read the name. Clinton Gable. My grip tightened around the phone. He wasn't supposed to have access. I'm sorry, sir. He was added as an authorized user at the time of account creation. Of course. He had helped me fill out the online application that night. Told me what to click, which box to check. Makes it easier, he'd said. I thanked the woman, hung up, and sat there in silence. The kind that doesn't just fill a room, it presses down on you. Later that day, I drove to the hospital. I told myself it was to visit Mom, but part of me was ready to walk into Clinton's office instead. I even slowed down when I passed the turnoff to his building. But something in me, maybe habit, maybe fear, kept the wheel straight. When I got to Mom's floor, her nurse smiled. Your brother was here earlier, she said. Bought a new recliner for her room. Said she deserved something comfortable. Did he? I replied. I sat next to Mom's bed, watching her breathe. The monitor beeped steadily beside her, the only sound that didn't feel like a lie. I opened that card to make things easier, I whispered. Didn't know I was buying their freedom from guilt. She stirred a little, but didn't wake. Her hand twitched toward mine. I took it, careful not to wake her. The hallway outside was quiet, but in my head, everything was loud. The years of swallowing pride, of being told silence was strength. Dad used to say, "Don't stir the pot, son. Keep the peace, even if it costs you." It had, every time. When Clinton wanted to go to college, I sold my guitar to help with tuition. When Dad's business failed, I sold my car. And when Mom got sick, I sold my quiet, piece by piece, just to keep everyone else comfortable. Now the debt had a name, and it was mine. The sun was setting when I drove home. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need more noise. That night, as I was making coffee, the phone rang again. Unknown number, I answered. Mr. Gable, this is Seton Hospital's billing department, a woman said. Your mother's insurance denied coverage for a new medication. We'll need another payment by Friday to continue treatment. I looked at the stack of bills on the counter, then at the card still sitting next to the untouched wine bottle. How much? I asked. $180-100. I opened my banking app. The balance was almost gone. Rent, groceries, gas, all of it drained by one word. Family. Mr. Gable? She asked gently. I exhaled slowly. Put it on the card. She thanked me. I hung up. For a long moment, I stood there, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The man looking back at me wasn't the same one who kept hoping things would change. His eyes were hollow, but sharp, focused. They'll pay for it, I said quietly. One way or another. I reached for my wallet and pulled out the folded receipt, the same one from the hospital weeks ago. The creases were deeper now, soft from being handled too many times. I smoothed it flat on the counter, tracing the numbers with my thumb. Just in case they forget, I whispered. But this time, my voice carried something new. It wasn't hope anymore. It was certainty, a promise. And promises, once broken, can turn into something sharper. It was past midnight. The street outside my apartment was quiet, the kind of silence that lets every thought echo louder than it should. I sat at the kitchen table, the unpaid statement in front of me, the numbers in red glaring like an open wound. I reread every line, each charge like a reminder carved into paper. Then I folded the statement neatly and placed it beside my mother's photo on the counter. "They broke the promise first," I whispered. The clock ticked, slow and steady. Somewhere between the seconds, I decided this would be the last time I sat still. The next morning, a knock at my door pulled me out of half sleep. No text, no warning, just the smell of Clinton's cologne seeping in before his voice did. "You didn't answer my calls," he said, as he stepped inside without waiting. His eyes scanned the table, the papers, the unpaid statement, the empty mug. "I didn't have anything left to say," I replied, not moving. He smirked, leaning against the counter like it was his house. "You worry too much, little brother. I'll pay you back. You just need to stop stressing. It's not good for Mom." That line hit like a slap. Not because of what he said, but how casually he used her as a shield. "Mom's peace," I said evenly, "isn't yours to weaponize." His smirk faltered for the first time. "Don't start drama," he said, tone clipped now. "You've always been too emotional. That's your problem." My silence stretched between us like a wall. For once, it wasn't submission. It was focus. I wasn't swallowing my words anymore. I was sharpening them. Clinton exhaled sharply, adjusted his tie, and headed for the door. "Handle yourself, Ro. You're embarrassing the family." When the door clicked shut, I stayed still for a moment, letting the weight settle. Then I reached for my jacket. 2 days later, I walked into the bank. The air smelled like coffee and polished wood. I approached the counter, voice steady. "I need full statements and account activity logs for this card." The teller, a middle-aged man with wireframe glasses, looked hesitant. "That's unusual, sir. We normally—" "It's my name on the line," I cut in, calm but firm. He nodded, clicked through his screen, and after several minutes, printed a thick packet of papers. I thanked him and carried it out like evidence. Back home, the sound of the printer filled the apartment as I made copies, each sheet a small reclaiming of control. Highlighting the charges, I saw it all clearly now. Not just the yacht, but more. A business retreat, hotel stays, restaurant tabs, one payment labeled under Clinton's company, Gable Consulting. All from my account. By the time I was done, the table was covered in paper, white proof of every quiet betrayal. I didn't feel angry. Not exactly. Just awake. I remembered another time I'd tried to speak up. It was right after Dad's funeral. We'd been sitting in the driveway, the smell of rain still on the air. I'd asked Clinton where the inheritance money had gone. "You think money defines family?" He'd snapped. "You're pathetic." That night, I told myself to keep the peace, to stay quiet, to believe silence meant strength. But peace built on silence isn't peace. It's surrender with better lighting. By the end of the week, I had made my decision. The next morning, I drove across town to Clinton's office. It was as artificial as he was. Glass walls, designer furniture, fake smiles. His assistant gave me a look of mild alarm as I walked straight past her. He was sitting behind his desk, scrolling through his phone. When he saw me, his expression flickered somewhere between surprise and irritation. "Rowan," he said slowly, "didn't expect to see you." I placed the stack of printed statements on his desk. They landed with a thud. "I'm giving you 1 week," I said. My voice was calm, almost soft. "Pay the charges, every dollar." He leaned back in his chair, lips curling. "Or what?" I met his gaze. "Or I stop being the quiet one." He chuckled, a short, humorless sound. "You'll regret that." I leaned forward slightly, close enough for him to see I wasn't bluffing. "Maybe. But not as much as you will." His face twitched, the mask slipping for half a second before he forced a grin. "You've changed, Ro." "No," I said. "You just never paid attention." I turned and left before he could answer. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off the building's mirrored facade, blinding for a moment. I squinted, then smiled faintly. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the fixer or the fool. "They've never met the version of me that stopped apologizing," I said quietly. And as I walked back to my truck, one thought followed me like a shadow, steady, clear, certain. And soon, everyone would. The drive home was long, but quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, but sharpens. Sunlight bled through the windshield, hot on my arms. But I kept the windows down. The wind slapped my face with every mile, like it was trying to remind me, "You're still here, you're still standing." For years, I cleaned up after them, canceled plans, took second shifts, cashed out savings, and now I was the one finally holding up the mirror. A few days later, I stepped into my mother's hospital room just after noon. The nurses had opened the blinds, letting in that filtered Austin light that makes everything look softer than it is. She sat propped up on pillows, thinner than last week, but alert. She smiled when she saw me. "Your brother told me you're upset." I stopped mid-step. "Did he?" "He's trying his best, Rowan." Her voice was gentle, but the words were loaded. There it was, Clinton's favorite magic trick. Rewrite the truth before anyone else gets to it. I pulled the chair beside her bed. "I'm not angry, Mom. I just think he's taking advantage of the situation." She looked at me like I'd just insulted God. "Rowan," she sighed. "He's family. We don't turn on family." I nodded slowly. "No, we don't." My voice barely held. "But we do let them turn on us. Quietly." She reached for my hand. I let her hold it, even as the heat in my chest built. Not anger. Not anymore. Just fatigue, like my heart had been running a marathon I never signed up for. Before I left, I adjusted her blanket. My fingers trembled just a little. She didn't notice. "Don't worry, Mom," I whispered. "I won't turn on family. I'll just stop covering for them." Back at the apartment, I sat with the weight of those words. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of my bed, and let the past replay. 17 years old. I remember the exact day Clinton asked to borrow money from my college fund. "I'll pay it back before fall," he'd said, laughing, arms slung around my shoulder like it was nothing. Fall came. College came. The money never did. And no one asked. Not Dad. Not Mom. They just looked at me like I was the reliable one, the quiet lender, the fixer. That's when I learned the unspoken rule in our house. Silence keeps the peace, but it also keeps them powerful. The next evening, I heard a knock. It wasn't a Clinton knock. Too soft. Too rehearsed. When I opened the door, Paige stood there, dressed sharp as ever, that tight smile glued to her face. "Clinton wanted me to check on you," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "He's worried. Thinks you might do something impulsive." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. She reached into her bag, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. "A peace offering," she said sweetly. "We can make all this go away." Quietly, I opened it. A check for $5,000. I didn't touch it. "That's not even close to what he took." She tilted her head. "It's not about the amount, Rowan. It's about resolution. And your mother doesn't need more stress right now." Her tone never rose, but her eyes did all the threatening. That quiet, syrupy venom she'd mastered over the years. I folded the check once, then slid it back across the table. Tell Clinton peace costs more than he can afford. She hesitated. For a moment, I thought she might push harder, but she just smiled again, colder this time. You always did take things too personally. And with that, she left. I stood there a while after, hands on the counter, breathing slowly like I was trying to hold my own pieces together. The check sat like a paperweight for something much heavier, years of pretending things were fine. Later that night, I sat by the window, the only light coming from my phone screen. I opened the Yacht video again. Champagne popping, kids laughing, Paige showing off her new bracelet, Clinton doing his fake laugh for the camera, the caption, "Worth every penny." Then I opened the credit statement, screenshotted the transaction line, then another, and another, labeled them, filed them into a new folder on my laptop. I named it, The Truth. You said keep quiet, I whispered to the room. Fine, I'll let the truth do the talking. The air around me felt still, like the moment before a storm breaks. No thunder yet, just the pressure building. The final thing I did before bed was open the laptop again. Not to read the statements, just to look. My own reflection stared back at me on the dark screen. The man who once avoided conflict. The man who used silence like armor. But this version, he wasn't afraid. They used my silence, I said under my breath. Now I'll use it better. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The room was still dark except for the faint glow of my laptop screen across the room. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. The weight in my chest wasn't dread anymore. It was intent. I poured a cup of coffee, no sugar, no cream, and sat at the table staring at the folder labeled The Truth. Everything I needed was already there. But today, it wasn't about keeping proof. It was about using it. Quietly. By mid-morning, I drove to the bank. The same woman from before, Kelly, looked up as I walked in. Her face softened when she recognized me. "Mr. Gable," she greeted, careful, polite. "I need something in writing," I said, setting the card statement on the counter. Everything tied to Clinton Gable's authorizations. Every transaction, every date, every signature. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "That's sensitive information. Even if he's listed as an authorized user, those files, I can get them through a fraud claim," I said quietly, cutting her off. "Or you can help me now. And it stays simple." Something in my tone must have landed because she nodded and began printing. Each sheet that slid out of the machine landed like a hammer. When she handed them over, I said, "Thank you." And I meant it. The pages felt heavier than paper. They were leverage, truth, given form. That afternoon, I parked outside a small brick office downtown. The sign still read, "Holt and Matthews, Family Law since 1973. I hadn't been here since Dad's will. Mr. Holt was older now, slower but still sharp. His office smelled like leather and old files. "Rowan," he said as I entered, standing to shake my hand. "Haven't seen you in a long time." I placed the folder on his desk. "I'm not suing," I told him. "Not yet. I just want this locked away somewhere safe." He flipped through the papers, eyes narrowing slightly. "Your brother did this?" I didn't answer, and he didn't need me to. After a pause, he looked up. "You've changed, son." I smiled faintly. "No, I just stopped mistaking silence for peace." Leaving the office, the air felt lighter, like something had shifted. Not in the world, just inside me. Over the next few days, I moved quietly. I didn't argue. I didn't confront. I recorded every call from Clinton, every text from Paige, every voicemail that started with, "Hey, just checking in." I didn't respond. I just saved. I built a timeline. Every fraudulent charge, every lie, every half-truth they'd fed our mother. I laid it out like a map, neat and complete. It was almost beautiful in a cold kind of way. This was my version of war. Not shouting, not fists, just precision, control. But control never lasts long when someone like Clinton feels it slipping. A week later, a letter arrived. Certified, thick envelope, legal header. It was from Clinton's company attorney. "Cease and desist," it read. "Redefamation of character and false financial allegations." The wording was formal, but the meaning was simple. "Shut up or we'll make you pay." I read it twice, then again. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. He was scared, that was new. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and set it aside. "Good," I said softly. "Fear looks better on you." That night, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "You're making a mistake, Rowan," Clinton snapped before I could speak. "You'll ruin yourself before you ruin me." I leaned back, letting the calm settle in. "Funny," I said. "I thought I already did that for you." Silence on the other end. Then, click. That silence? That was victory. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The next day, I sat at my desk with every piece of evidence spread out before me. Receipts, statements, emails, screenshots. I scanned them all, then uploaded them into a secure cloud folder. When everything was done, I drafted a short email. "To Mom, Paige, and family," the subject line read. The message was simple. "If I ever stop answering, open this link." I scheduled it to send automatically next week. Not a threat, just insurance. Then I pulled out the folded receipt, the same one I'd kept since that first hospital payment. The creases were deeper now, nearly splitting at the edges. I smoothed it flat with my palm, then folded it again, slower this time. "Just in case they forget," I said softly, smiling. That night, I turned off every light in the apartment. The city outside buzzed faintly. Cars, sirens, life going on as usual. I sat by the window, eyes tracing the sky. "They taught me silence was weakness," I whispered. Then I leaned back in the chair, voice steady, final. They were wrong. The moment my shoes met the polished tile of the hospital lobby, I felt it, that quiet charge in the air, like a fuse waiting for the match. I held a to-go cup of coffee in one hand, black and bitter. It wasn't about staying awake. It was about staying sharp. I wasn't here just for Mom today. I was here because the truth had weight now, and it needed somewhere to land. And it didn't take long. Clinton was already there, leaning against the wall near the volunteer desk, phone in one hand, charm painted on his face like it cost him nothing. "Rowan," he said, slipping the phone into his jacket pocket. "Got a minute?" I gave a nod and followed him toward the edge of the lobby, just far enough from earshot, but not far enough to be private. He always chose his distance carefully, just enough deniability, never enough honesty. "Let's just talk," he started, smoothing the front of his blazer. "We can fix this before Mom finds out." His voice was soft, coaxing, as if he were speaking to a scared dog or a wounded ego. I stayed quiet, letting him fill the silence with whatever story he'd rehearsed on the drive over. "You've always been too sensitive," he continued, waving a hand. "You don't understand how business works." I tilted my head. "Business?" I said, voice low. "You mean family theft with better lighting?" He froze for a second, just enough. Then the smile came back, thinner now. "I'm trying to keep things calm, for Mom." That line again, always hiding behind her. I didn't respond. Just let the quiet between us stretch, heavy and hot like August air. Clinton started talking again, too fast, too defensive. Every word he said became another rope in the noose he was tying for himself. I didn't need to shout. My silence was loud enough now. That afternoon, I left the hospital and drove across town. The city moved around me, same as always. Honking horns, crosswalk beeps, steam from manholes, but I moved differently. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. At a small cafe near South Congress, I met Mara, my mom's nurse. She wore her scrubs beneath a cardigan and ordered chamomile tea. She didn't speak right away, just stirred her cup like the words needed time to steep. I probably shouldn't say anything, she finally began, eyes on her spoon. But your brother had us bill some of your mom's therapy sessions to your card, said you approved it. The cup in my hand didn't shake, but something in me tilted. He said you were covering it all, she added, still avoiding eye contact. I nodded slowly, let it settle. You did the right thing telling me, I said, calm, kind, measured. She looked up, face drawn with guilt. What are you going to do? I sipped my coffee and set the cup down. What I should have done a long time ago, I said. Stop pretending we're family. By Saturday night, I was standing outside a luxury hotel ballroom, wearing the one suit I didn't hate and holding my phone like it was a detonator. Clinton's company gala was in full swing. Laughter echoed from the chandeliers, glasses clinked, and jazz floated through the air like perfume. I walked in without hesitation. I wasn't on the guest list, but I wasn't there to network. I was there for the final movement. Paige spotted me first. She blinked, nearly coughed on her drink. Rowan? You weren't... You're right, I said, walking past her. I wasn't invited. I was owed. At the far end of the ballroom, Clinton was on stage, giving a speech about integrity and family values. I watched him stretch the word family like it still meant something coming from his mouth. I stood near the back, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. The projector behind Clinton stuttered once, then flickered. A video began to play. The yacht, the laughter, the ocean breeze carrying their false freedom. People turned. Champagne stopped midair. Then came the screenshots, the transactions, the statements, every lie printed in bold, names, amounts, dates, Clinton's signature. Gasps filled the room like steam from a ruptured pipe. I didn't move, didn't need to. I'd already said what I needed to. Clinton stammered, his words crumbling in his mouth. Paige dropped her glass. The room was a snow globe someone had just shaken too hard. He rushed off stage toward me, his voice low and harsh now. You think this makes you a hero? He snapped, grabbing my arm. I looked him in the eye. No, I said, just someone who finally stopped playing the villain you wrote me as. Security appeared at the edge of my vision. Cameras flashed. Somewhere behind us, murmurs turned into whispers, whispers into truths. Clinton stepped back, fury and disbelief swimming in his eyes. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands still while the world catches up. I walked out without looking back. The night air hit me like a rinse, cool, fresh, clean. Funny how something as small as a file, a click, a moment of honesty could tear through years of deceit like it was paper thin. I kept walking down the sidewalk, past the valets and the luxury cars. No one stopped me. I whispered to myself, not with bitterness, but clarity. Funny how silence breaks everything when it finally decides to speak. The sunlight coming through the blinds was sharp, like it had something to prove. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since before dawn. Calls, texts, voicemails, names I hadn't seen in years. Some with sympathy, some with threats. Most from numbers I didn't even recognize. I let it all ring. For the first time in my life, the noise wasn't locked inside my own head. It was out there, where it belonged. I drank my coffee in silence, watching the steam rise from the mug, steady and slow. The world was spinning louder now, but I felt still. The headlines hit that morning like a hammer through glass. Local entrepreneur under investigation for fraudulent family transactions. Clinton Gable's real estate empire in crisis amidst allegations. Sources say brother turned whistleblower after years of financial manipulation. They used photos from the gala, Clinton mid-speech, the screen flickering behind him, a shot of Page frozen in disbelief, and in the corner of one picture, barely visible, me. Standing like I didn't belong, but knowing I finally did. The backlash came fast. Clinton's stock value dropped overnight. Page gave a polished statement to the press calling it a deeply personal misunderstanding that's been misrepresented. But none of that landed as hard as the voice message from my mother. She sounded tired, like the years had caught up to her all at once. Rowan, why did you do this to your brother? Just 6 words, but they hit harder than anything Clinton ever threw at me. I sat there with the phone pressed to my chest for a long time until the silence between us said more than either of us could. Later that day, I drove to the hospital. The hallways were quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that feels staged. I sat by her bed as she looked out the window, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. You raised us to be honest, I said. I'm just finally doing it. She didn't respond, just kept looking outside like maybe the answer was out there somewhere, on the trees, or in the sky, or drifting between the clouds. I didn't expect forgiveness, but I also didn't regret the truth. A week later, an envelope arrived with thick paper and bold print. A subpoena. Clinton was suing for emotional distress and defamation. The irony nearly made me laugh. Nearly. He still thinks this is about money, I muttered as I gathered the documents I'd carefully archived over months. The receipts, the video, the statements, the recordings. There was no trembling in my hands now, only a steady grip born of clarity. On the morning of the hearing, I stood at the courthouse steps. Reporters hovered like bees, mics outstretched. A young journalist asked, "Do you think you went too far?" I paused, looking at her, not with defiance, but with something heavier. You can't go too far when you're just telling the truth, I said quietly. Inside the courthouse, it was cold and formal. Lawyers in suits, faces I didn't know whispering about names I did. Afterward, I returned home and sat at the same table where this all started. That folded receipt, still there, tucked under the coaster like it had been waiting. I unfolded it, edges soft now, ink faded in some spots, but the numbers, still clear, still true. Beside it, a court-issued check. Clinton had been ordered to return part of the funds. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. I placed the check next to the receipt and took a photo. 2 pieces of paper, years of silence between them. I texted the photo to Mom. Just in case they forget, I didn't. That line held everything I'd never said. The ache, the betrayal, the stubborn thread of loyalty I couldn't shake. I didn't expect a reply. By the end of the week, I needed air. Real air, not hospital corridors or courthouse lobbies. I drove out to the lake, the same one Dad used to take me to when life still felt simple. I sat on the dock with my shoes off, feet skimming the water. The sun was dropping low, casting long shadows over the surface, rippling in gold. They taught me peace meant silence, I whispered. But peace? Peace means truth. I closed my eyes and let the sounds of the water fill the spaces inside me that had gone hollow. No revenge, no bitterness, just quiet, real quiet. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Mara. Your mom watched the news today. She told me to tell you she's proud. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Not from the screen, from something older, deeper. Took her long enough, I said aloud, my voice catching just slightly. But that's okay. I waited my whole life to hear it. And just like that, I exhaled. It had been 2 months since the courtroom lights dimmed and the last of the reporters found someone else to chase. 2 months since the storm passed. Or maybe since my life finally began. The calls stopped. The inbox cleared. Even the strangers who used to pretend they knew me fell silent. What remained was stillness. Each morning, before the sun lifts fully above the hills, I unlock the bays at the car wash. Same key, same grind of metal, same bitter coffee in a cracked thermos. The scent of soap and pavement still lingers in the air. But everything's different. I count quarters with a strange contentment now. Not because I need them, but because they mean something steady, something real. The rhythm of daily life has stopped being punishment. It's become proof that I lived through the unraveling and stayed standing. Mrs. Ortiz pulls in every Wednesday, her SUV always dusty from her ranch roads. She leans out the window and calls, "Good to see you back, Rowan. You look lighter." I smile, honest and easy. Feels that way. In the small back office, the folder labeled "The Truth" sits untouched in the drawer. I haven't opened it since the court closed the file. I haven't had to. It's not a wound anymore. It's just evidence that I didn't fold. Midweek, I get a text from Mom. "Soup day soon?" And another, a day later. "Your dad asked about you." It takes me until Sunday to respond. That morning, I wipe the grease from under my nails and drive across town. The streets are quiet. Church traffic easing off, football games not yet begun. When I pull into the driveway, my father's already on the porch. He looks smaller than I remember. Maybe it's the way his shoulders hang now, less rigid. We don't hug. We nod. For now, that's enough. "You working steady?" he asks. "Yeah," I say. "Pipes don't fix themselves." He lets out a breath that almost becomes a chuckle. "Good. That's good." Inside, Mom is humming. The same song she used to hum when we were kids, just under her breath, like a secret spell to keep the house from falling apart. She looks up from the stove. "You came." I set the bag of cornbread down. Wouldn't miss soup day. There's a moment when we all stand still, unsure of how to move forward. But then the soup simmers, and the spoons clink gently against the bowls, and conversation starts, slow but warm. Later that night, back at the apartment, I scroll through old messages and stop on one from Clinton. 2 weeks ago, out of nowhere. "You win." I stared at it for a long time then. Tonight, I open it again and start to type. "No, I just stopped losing." But I don't send it. I delete it instead. Some victories don't need to be spoken. Some peace is quieter than revenge. And that's when I know. Closure isn't a word, or a verdict, or a text message. It's silence that no longer hurts. A few days later, I drive out to Lake Travis, just as the sun begins to dip behind the ridge. The air smells like pine and mud and old summer days. I find the same spot on the dock I sat at months ago, the one I'd come to when it all felt too loud. The receipt is still in my wallet, folded, softened, familiar now. I pull it out one last time. The ink has faded in places, but the memory is sharp. Holding it up to the last light, I realize it's just paper now. No longer heavy, no longer sharp. I kneel, reach out, and let it fall into the lake. It floats for a moment, a small square against the vast surface, then sinks. The ripples stretch wide, then vanish. That's enough, I whisper. You don't owe anyone peace but yourself. The water glows golden, soft as forgiveness. When I get back to the wash, there's a teenager fumbling with the change machine. His baseball cap's too big, and he looks like he's trying not to ask for help. I walk over, fix the jammed quarter, and hand him another one. Here, I say. For luck. He grins. You own this place? I nod. Yeah. Took me a while to figure out I didn't need to own anything else. The sun's breaking over Route 9 as I look up, pale orange bleeding into blue, cars starting to roll past with the early risers. I take a deep breath. Not because I need air, but because I can. I used to think strength meant holding everyone together, I say, almost to myself. Now I know. It means learning when to let go. And in the quiet that follows, I don't hear noise. I hear myself.